Osei shamayim v'aretz, ayitein lamoraglecha, ayanu shomrecha, hinei lo yanum v'lo yishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha yad yaminecha, Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareach b'layla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha u'vohecha, me'ata ve'ad olam.
A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life, guard your going and your coming, now and forever.
Good afternoon. We are here today to remember Frank Schneider. We are here today to be with this family, to pray together, to cry together, to laugh together, to hold each other through this moment in time. My name is Cantor Elizabeth Sachs. I'm the senior cantor here, and I am joined by Rabbi Emily Hyatt, our rabbi here at Temple Emmanuel. We know that when we lose someone we love, it is a time that is filled with memories both bitter and sweet. And so we're here to remember those memories of Frank that are both bitter and sweet. So we will begin our service today with poems and psalms from our ancient tradition to ground ourselves and to find comfort in texts that have provided solace and hope for our people for generations.
When I die, give what's left of me away to children and loved ones and old men. And if you need to cry, cry for your neighbor walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. So look for me in the people I've known. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands and by letting go of children that need to be free. Remember, love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. We take a moment now to recite words that come at this moment in the life cycle of a person so often, in so many faiths. We recite the words of Psalm 23, and if that doesn't ring a bell for you, the famous verse, when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. And our sages teach us that sometimes we feel like our loved one is in that valley and that we are missing them and we are helping them in this moment. And we also know that perhaps it's us, that we're the ones that are in the valley of the shadow of death because we're mourning and grieving and missing. And so as we walk in that valley, we know that these are words and people and communities that come for us when we are at our lowest.
Adonai roi lo echsar bino deshe yarbitzeini al mei menuchot yenaleni nafshi yeshovel yancheni v'maglei tzedek yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo gam ki elech begitz amavet lo irora ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha heima yenamuni taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorarai dishanta vashem an roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yudefuni kol yemei chayai kol yemei chayai v'shavti bevel Adonai leorech yamim Adonai roi lo echsar.
Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
In the book of Ecclesiastes, we are told that there is a time and a purpose for every experience under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time for weeping and a time for laughing. A time for silence and a time for speaking. In the silence that accompanies the passing of our loved one, the passing of Frank, we are commanded to use our words to speak about his life, to honor the legacy of who he was and how he lived, and not to imagine that we could possibly tell his entire life story, for we know for sure that that cannot be true, especially when we are talking about Frank Schneider. But to use our words to lift the values that we have learned from him, and to use our words to honor the ideas that he lived by. And so this afternoon, we are going to hear from first Frank's children, and then his grandchildren. And in doing so, we will lift his memory and bring it into this space and make this place feel as if he is sitting with us in a holy way and enjoying, hopefully, the beautiful words that his family will say. And so we invite his children to come and honor him.
There's notes up here, loud. I hope I can do this. So we're told not to do the entire life story, so that's what I wrote. I'll give not the 40-page eulogy, and I'm going to struggle. But I'm looking for ways to get through it, thinking of my grandfather, Nat, who died on April 1st. Nat loved April Fool's Day, and I remember thinking, oh, maybe he's going to come back. This was just a bad joke. And so bad jokes run in the family, so what I'm going to do is try to remember some of my dad's bad jokes. That eulogy is 80 pages long. So it's never easy to lose a loved one, regardless of age or circumstance. In particular, with your parent at whatever age, you're transported through time, a time tunnel, back to your childhood. And that's where I'm going to start. Memories of my dad as dad. Whew. As a little boy, my dad was my hero. He was perfect. Or at least like Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. He was the master of the house. I remember his thundering voice when things were amiss. And by amiss, I mean me. Or by things, I mean me. And by amiss, it was I did something wrong. I remember his hands. They were distinct, very different from mine. The space between his thumb and his fingers just seemed bigger to me. I knew they would always protect me, and they remained strong until the very, very end. And I remember his sleeping habits. And before everyone laughs, no, not that. I remember they would wake up at 4 o'clock every morning and go to work before sunrise. Always before any of us in the house would wake up. Always before we wake up, but sometimes in high school, not before I would come home. or more awkwardly, concurrent with when I came home, and we would pass each other in the kitchen. What I remember most is how I loved to please him, how I loved hearing his praise, and how much I hated to disappoint him. It only happened a couple of times. I don't remember the circumstances, but boy, I remember those feelings. I remember my dad as the boss. At work, by the time I have a memory, he was always the boss, the guy in charge, and he had all the answers. He was always put together, a conservative suit or sport coat, a button-down Oxford shirt, blue or white, a trim tie, usually striped, and polished shoes. Now, I don't want to give a misimpression, though. He was always put together at work until business casual came along. The new rules were never his friend. You might remember his sweaters, and they might have been in style when he bought them, but he would wear them for years, decades, in fact, long after they had gone out of style. And there was the note card. Not just a note card, but a monogrammed line note card with a line for everything he had to do and a check mark when he finished that task. He was so disciplined. If there was one thing I wanted to inherit that seems to have escaped me, it was his discipline. No matter how hard I tried, and I even have my own card with my name and my phone number, but it just seems so impossible. Here's the thing. When it came to being the boss, to being a professional, all I wanted was to be like him, to be just like him. When I was young, my dad loved sports. He played handball. I'll come back to that in a second. I think he was pretty good. He won some tournaments at the JCC. But his passions were skiing, tennis, and eventually cycling. He shared those passions with me, except handball, again, which I'm going to come back to in a moment. My dad had his quirks. He loved food. Sometimes he loved food more than it seemed his life itself. He loved his cars, no matter how ugly they might be, and I'm thinking of a certain plum Ford Explorer that Daniel, I think you thankfully took care of. He had his temper in sports. Being his tennis racket was a suicide mission. For a short time, he tried golf, and it was even more risky to be his golf club. He also had a temper if the service was bad in the restaurant. But for the sake of all of us, I'm going to skip those stories. And boy, he had a temper if someone wronged his kids, his grandkids, his friend, or his president. But probably his biggest quirk, coming back to his sleeping, was the ability to sleep on demand. In fact, anywhere he happened to be, when he decided it was time to sleep, he didn't get up or tell everyone to go home. He didn't want to be rude or leave the table. He would just close his eyes, put down his head, and go to sleep. And some of my friends are looking at me that may have been inherited. Lastly, let me talk about my dad as I knew him as an adult. I know how much pride he took in my work, in all of our work. And though I made some questionable career decisions along the way, I'm not talking about the current one, I never felt judged. I always felt his pride. For 2 years, I was his business partner working with family businesses. I learned it was easier for us to tell others, other families, how to get along than it was for us to work together. But I always will cherish those 2 years and our memories of our time together. As an adult, I also learned that not everything came easy to him. I learned about his shyness and insecurities. I learned that he didn't have all the answers or know exactly what he was supposed to do or say, but he always tried to do what was right. But the most important role I saw in him as an adult, and where I know at times he struggled the most, was as a grandpa. He loved all 8 of his grandchildren. Each one was his favorite in a very special way. Unfortunately, it was hard for him to tell you all this, but no, it was true. I know they all know how much he loved them. And I know you know how proud he was of each and every one of you. But the love of his life was my mother. He loved you, and through us, he gave us the greatest family. So let me close with a few memories of my dad. Skiing. We loved skiing together. He taught his kids and his grandkids to ski, and he loved every moment of it. We took countless trips to go skiing, sometimes a few of us, sometimes all 16 of us. But one memory stands out, just him and me. We had skied in Vail and we're driving back. Adam was about 9 months old. Adam and Julie were at home. We were driving back to Denver. We had car phones. This was before mobile phones. The car phone was attached. And we were driving up the tunnel, up the road from Silverthorne to the tunnel. And I called home to Julie. And Julie said, I just took a pregnancy test. And the phone cut out. He and I sat, as we drove through the tunnel, and until we got past Georgetown to get service, saying absolutely nothing. Not knowing were we going to have another child. If you meet Daniel, you know the outcome to this story. But that silence of those times was a special time for me, because I knew the support I had for him, no matter what the future held. I mentioned handball. We lived in Miami, and I learned a new sport at the time that was popular, racquetball. My dad didn't play racquetball, so I was going to teach him how to play racquetball. So we went to the racquetball court, and I didn't think this all the way through. I mentioned he played handball. He played tournament handball. He had trophies. He had won handball. Handball is a game in a same-size court as a racquetball court that you hit the ball with your hand to try to win the game. Racquetball is handball with a weapon. He proceeded to beat me 21-0. He never let me forget that. One of my cherished memories was Super Bowl 32. I was in Chicago at the time. He was here, he still had his season tickets, and through the lottery, he got the tickets to the Super Bowl. And so I said, well, I've got lots of miles. I can get us flight tickets. We got a hotel, and we stayed in Coronado in San Diego. Spent 4 days together, just the two of us. It was a MasterCard commercial. Tickets X dollars, hotel Y dollars, airfare Z dollars. I can tell you how much those tickets were worth to us, though, because as we walked to the stadium, we were offered $10,000 for each of our tickets. And we looked at each other. 97, $10,000 was more than it is today. But we said, no, we're going to this game. And the Broncos won. Our seats were on the 5-yard line where John Elway did his spiral. And that is a memory that I'll always cherish. And my last memory is memory of cycling. I mentioned in 1982, when I put out a notice, I mentioned in 1982, my dad and I rode to the top of El Paso, the first time for both of us. He rode in gym shorts and a t-shirt, I rode in sweatpants. If you see pictures of us riding today, that's not how we ride. We didn't know any better. But that was the beginning of a lifelong passion. He would go on to ride mountaintops, go to the Tour de France, and share that passion with everyone he loved. When he was 74, the Tour de Cure, American Diabetes Association, announced that Greg LeMond was going to be, I'm sorry for taking this from you, was going to be there. And whoever raised the most money would have dinner with Greg LeMond. My dad, being a fan, said, I can do this. Many of you may remember those calls. He called and he raised not just the most money for the year, but the most money they've ever raised. And he did it again the next year on his 75th birthday. And the picture I cherish is when Adam, Charles, Harry, and I rode with him on his 75th birthday, 75 miles. It was his passion to the very end. In fact, a memory I have with his grandchildren was going to the Cherry Creek Criterium for one of his final races and seeing the start and being there to cheer him as he came around to the end. And he was so grateful to have each and every one of you. So here I am at the end of my remarks, saying the last and by far the hardest goodbye. But Dad, you left us a priceless legacy. You didn't always have the words, but you lived your life and taught us by example the three most important lessons. Be honest, be good, be brave. I love you.
Cantor, did you say words? Because we have a lot of them, all of us. And we didn't coordinate it, but it's going to coordinate quite well. So Frank came into this world a secret, but leaves this world, as we know it, a lasting legacy. A secret, you ask? You see, years ago, his mother, Minnie, shared with us that she was too embarrassed to admit to her very close but Oklahoma-based family that on the heels of having her first baby, Fanny Rose, she quickly found herself pregnant again here in Denver. It wasn't until the Oklahoma family, came for their annual pilgrimage visit that they knew she had her perfect and complete family. Frank became her forever Frankie. The legacy part is easy to explain. It's because of you, all of you. Those of you who are here and out there in virtual land, who are here to pay your respects, here to listen to our stories and his stories, here to support our family and his family, and here to share in his uniquely frank expressions of love. So maybe you are here because he was your friend, like Laser, who spent 70 years, imagine 70 years of a best friendship on this loyal journey of true and sacred friendship. What might have started as youthful banter among young men evolved into a forever friendship, sharing long marriages to wives who also became close friends. Dina even birthed Brad on Lay's and Roberta's wedding night, which those of you who know Frank and you know he loved food realized that it was a complicated priority and conflicting commitment for him because it was a free fancy meal that was going to be served at the wedding. So what did he do? He dropped Dina at the hospital and proceeded to the wedding. Lays and Frank also shared kids. We were all the same age. Lori and I shared a birth date, separate by a year, and Laser's son coined the phrase Franken, like Frankendina, as if it was a special place to go down the street in our neighborhood in Southmore. Just a week before our dad was diagnosed with this debilitating cancer that added to everything else he had, Lays and the Lunch Boys blessed him with their company like they always did every other week at Sam's number 3. Lays and Jerry Feiner even got to take their 3 daughters out to lunch together not long before that. Frank thrived on that kind of social connection. So maybe you were here because you were like Rick, another long-term friend who bonded over skiing, as Brad said, a favorite sport, but also not just skiing, but keeping records of everything about skiing and everything about health and everything about everything, and then sharing those data points with each other because few others, if any others, would listen to you both. Rick, you gave Frank such a loving friendship farewell the other day on behalf of his whole community of friends. Maybe you were here because you were a work colleague, and I'm looking at a few, who knew Frank in some capacity. You knew him to be small f Frank and big F Frank. You experienced that he could dialogue, debate, and deconstruct your thoughts in a sometimes less than gentle way in an attempt to convince you to see the world through the lens he deemed most appropriate at the time. Some of you also experienced that he would then come back to you later And again, dialogue, debate, and deconstruct the very thought he convinced you to believe, because he now changed his mind and needed you to believe the way he now believes. Our office colleague, Kelly, wrote today that those who knew Frank often experienced this, quote, "He was a tough old bird who I 100% adored and loved." Maybe you are here and listening because you were one of his thousands of clients and mentees. You know he loved all things columns, ownership, and family business. And when I say columns, I don't mean pillars, I mean spreadsheets. So many of you have reached out to share how Frank was the wonder whisperer in the most complex and challenging of business and family situations. Some of you even joined him on his lifelong quest to learn, even following in his footsteps to go to his beloved Harvard Business School Owner-President's Management Program. You know who you are, and we hope you know how much pride he took in your own journeys to meteoric success. And maybe you were here because you witnessed ours, mine, and my dad's very special 25-year family business journey. We were what any of you with half a clear mind would observe and call method and mess. Somehow together we worked magic, not just the type that made Frank and me happy. Dad, is that correct grammar? Frank and me, I don't know, he'd always correct me, but especially the type that made other families flourish and businesses thrive. Many of you were here because you were part of, as Brad mentioned, communities that he chose to help thrive and flourish on their own, be it Cobra's biking race, be it Tour de France, be it the Jewish community that he loves so dearly, despite not really being religious at all. Through gentle persuasion and emotional appeal, or through a wicked metaphoric 2x4 over your forehead, you supported his cause because, as Brad said, he knew and you knew he was in pursuit of helping the greater good. Maybe you were here because you were still chuckling about his quirky social behaviors. Maybe you were the friend or prospective client or service professional who sat with him at lunch and witnessed him as he ordered the healthiest of meals, a salad, no dressing and no taste, at a restaurant, usually the same one every time, and a clean plate as if it was a side item. Upon placing the order on the table, the server would inevitably ask, "Is there anything else I can get you?" And Frank would inevitably say, "Jelly or jam, please." By the time the server came back with the jelly for allegedly the salad, which is all he ordered from the server, his salad would be dressed with the salad dressing he carried in his very own briefcase, and the empty plate would be filled with the warm, soggy toast he brought from home in a closed Ziploc baggie. He definitely did it his way. Someone was with him. So just a few more maybes. Maybe you're here because you are the beneficiary of his silent and generous philanthropy. You paid for school or started a business or secured health care you otherwise maybe could not access without help, his help, and Dina's help and support. There are many of you, all of whom we take great pride in, and few of whom, if any, we even know about. Maybe you are here because you are a niece or a nephew and the course of your life was impacted by his ambition to mentor, teach, guide, and be that through a passion for cycling, a career pursuit, or even a choice of a spouse. His integrity and honesty and fierce loyalty always placed him in the center of our great big family. We always felt him proactively preaching, quote, family unity, even as he religiously converted every dining room chair into the place he would take his regular post-meal nap. On a special note, Frank, despite not being very religious, but also being very spiritual, would be most excited to learn that the same day his journey ended, Cousin Heather gave birth to her baby Finley. Continuity and succession were his things. Maybe you are here because you connected to one of his 8 grandchildren, all of whom gave him abundant purpose in their lifetime and made the reflection of his own 79 years more than worthwhile. You were his true meaning in life. And maybe you are here because you are friends with one of us or one of our amazing spouses who he cherished so. You know that little gave him more pride than witnessing Brad's genuine commitment and persevering courage to serve this great nation. You know that Tracy was the darling of his spirit, placing pets and pictures that he cherished in not only his life story, but in the lives of so many others, purely from the goodness of her heart. He always Kfeld, and those that don't know Kfeld, took great pride in Tracy's beautiful way of also being small f committed in making sure someone knew the moment of truth and had no pussyfooting, no adjectives, just saying it like it was. Finally, maybe you are here because you know that behind the briefcases, the quirky habits, the energized emotions that often got expressed through his tone of saying, "Damn it, Dina," he knew that he had the rare fortune of finding a life partner who made 62 years of marriage sacred, soulful, and simply the best it could have been. They together redefined partnership on values that have been held for thousands of years. We all knew him, loved him, sometimes loathed him, but always experienced him, his loyalty to life, and his unique way of love. So, Dad, you might have been a secret coming into the world, but you are no secret leaving it. This group, these words, this is just a tiny fraction. I had to put something math in this eulogy. So, tiny fraction of the lasting legacy you left by just being frankly frank. Early this past week, your cohesively spoken and from the core of your soul declaration was, "Love you all." Our lasting declaration to you and your legacy, Dad, is love all of you.
Okay. Hold on a second.
We're the wordy ones, she'll have the most meaning.
First of all, Kim didn't write about herself in it. She mentioned Brad and me, but imagine the joy 25 years of working together must have brought Frank and how proud he must have been all along the way. Okay. So I wasn't going to speak until this morning, so it's a bit last minute to share a few thoughts about Frank. And a lot has been said about Frank that we all knew, who we all knew and loved. And I feel like it's a bit of a lesson in the letter F today to describe Frank. There's foodie Frank, fall asleep at all times Frank, the fitness Frank, fitness fanatic I should say, focused and fastidious Frank, and my personal favorite, the FU Frank. Sorry, God. But I just wanted to thank my dad, Frank, for a few things that he and I shared in life together. Thank you, Frank, for giving me my love of Glenn Miller and other big band music, as well as all the corny Broadway musicals, Guys and Dolls, Fiddler on the Roof, the corny ones, no, I get to that later. The corny one for Frank, the really sophisticated ones, and classical music was Dina. Thank you, Frank, for the 17,456 trips to eat Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For the grounding I received in high school, which involved 8 weeks of forced time together, which meant 8 straight weekends of skiing with Frank, and then Frank feeling so guilty that he went and bought me a new pair of skis. And trust me, for a high school student, it was punishment to spend 8 solid weekends with your parents, though it also did improve my skiing tremendously. And that was a great time that we did enjoy together. And thank you, Frank, for listening to the soundtrack of Grease with me on repeat 2,847,000 times. And thank you for being the parent and the grandparent who loved and was fiercely proud of all your kids and your grandkids. We were proud of you too. But most of all, Frank, thank you for being 100% unapologetically you, and for letting all of us be 100% unapologetically who we are too. That's it.
Five.
Good afternoon. I'm Adam Schneider. I'm Frank's eldest grandson. My grandfather and I, we had a special relationship. We shared the same 3 passions in life: skiing, bicycle racing, and the Denver Broncos. And I should probably also add junk food as well. But deeper than our common interests, I want to share what made my grandfather my role model. My grandfather was a man of contradictions. He was a well-known nervous Nelly, worrying at every real or imagined danger to his grandkids playing on the jungle gym. Yet at the same time, he also raced his bicycle, even at the young age of 85. He answered his country's calling, serving in the army in Germany. Yet he would tell me with pride of his comical, Larry David-esque travails, leading to his firing as a company clerk at the unit he claimed was the 4077 MASH. He was a consummate professional, maintaining himself as a sharp and respected consultant with a truly unquestionable sense of ethics and integrity. Yet there is no one you'll ever meet in your entire life who loved falling asleep on the couch as much as he did. He was disciplined about maintaining his health and fitness, religiously training on the bicycle, and even meticulously tracking the very minutes of sleep he got. Literally, Frank would wake up in the morning and proudly report at breakfast to me. He went to bed at 9:22, woke up at 2:38, fell back to sleep at 2:52, woke up at 4:13, fell back to sleep at 4:24, woke up at 7 a.m., getting a total of 9 hours and 14 minutes of sleep. Every night he was like this. Yet simultaneously, as my grandma Dina would say, Frank was a human trash disposal whose self-professed favorite cuisine were leftovers, and he would gleefully polish off any remaining dinner, or better yet, dessert. I share these Frankisms with you all today, not just to laugh and to take joy at the small things that made him who he was. Rather, these contradictions speak to an outlook on life worth living. Frank recognized the need to take life seriously, but still find the joy in it. to be dedicated to one's work and one's success, but never to compromise on what you see is right. To care and provide for your family, but still do the things you love. And to pursue your personal goals with all your heart and all your might, while still not letting them distract you from the people that truly matter. So those passions in life I mentioned at the beginning, I did not simply share them with my grandfather. I shared them because of him. I admired Frank for who he was and who he strove to be. And I sought to emulate him. So one day, when I have grandchildren of my own, I'll give them a not-so-sneaky pinch on the rear, stick them a little Tootsie Pop before dinner, and hopefully be a little bit more like my grandfather. Thank you. I love you, Frank.
You don't need the second step. In classic Frank fashion, we need to tell you about how grand our grandfather was and role model our Papa truly was to us. Papa was consistency. The same biscotti cookies every day, the same seat at the table, the same routines, the same jokes, order at his desk, paperclip jar, sticky notes at the edge, daily note-taking from the newspaper to relate to his grandchildren. This consistency was reliability, dependency, and safety. It was something we valued and will forever be grateful for because it was a commitment to us.
My papa was a man of strength in work ethic, beliefs, and even in physicality and standing. That's why, even when he lay on his deathbed on that final day, in a state many would call weakness, his strength was ever present when he squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, can I have a napkin? His strength was ever present when he squeezed my hand, and I felt the abundance of love that I knew he had in his heart. It is because of him that I know there is more than one, in fact, a multitude of ways to say, I love you.
So, Papa, while you are no longer with us, we will feel the love in your air, your love in the air around us, and in the little things that mean, I love you.
Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, our God and God of our ancestors. As we experience this holy moment of memory, we pray that we might serve you with honor, grace, and compassion. Guide us as we walk through this sacred moment in the life of this beautiful family. Help us to extend comfort, courage, and strength to the mourners, so that together we will all know that in both joy and sadness, you, Adonai, our God, are with us. And let us all say, Amen. In the Jewish tradition, throughout our ancient texts, there is a classic tension between two types of plants: the cedar tree and the water reed. In Psalm 92, we read, "The righteous shall thrive like the cedars of Lebanon, tall, strong, everlasting." And the Talmud teaches us that we must be flexible like the reed, rooted in the ground, but able to bend and be soft. Cedars and reeds, strength and softness, firmness and flexibility. Our tradition teaches us that we must be both, experience both. And from all the beautiful eulogies that we just heard, it's so clear that Frank Schneider internalized and embodied this very tension. For so many years, especially in his early family life, he was firm and resolute and strong like the cedar tree. From the predictability of his schedule, he was actually, the family told me, his neighbor's alarm clock. If the garage door didn't open and wake them up, the neighbors got worried and called to make sure that everything was okay. He was strong in his exercise regime, obsessed with his health, always on a diet, bringing his own food to the restaurants. He was strong in his work ethic, a determined CPA, the ultimate life accountant. He was strong in his edict that if you accept an assignment, you must follow through. You cannot quit. And Dina shared with us that he became the master of a Masonic lodge, which is a 9-year commitment. And 6 months in, he decided he hated it. But he was determined to finish it because he would not quit. He was strong in his interpersonal relationships. He carried a card in his pocket with what he was supposed to do for everyone and with everyone every day, including things like, wish my wife a happy birthday. Check. Help my children with their homework. Check. He was strong in that he would not ask for help and had a hard time accepting help, like so many in his generation. And he was strong in his relationship to his Judaism, his own, perhaps unique interpretation of his principles. Perhaps we could call him the ultimate Reform Jew. He was a founding member of Temple Sinai and knew and strongly believed that his family should be there on a regular basis, even ushering on Yom Kippur. But he also knew that he had his own decisions of what happened on Yom Kippur and potentially took a break from his ushering to visit a certain other place with golden arches. And as you have heard many times, he was strong in his sleeping, really good at falling asleep. Sometimes this strength translated into strength of tongue, as we also have heard, or as Kim described, verbal road rage. And he was strong when he was in the army in Germany for 2 years. And he moved from many different jobs in the army because he was strong in how much he stood up for what he believed in, which you might imagine did not go over well in the army. But really and truly, this strength was also such a virtue because he was strong and steady, providing stability and comfort for his family, using his strength to make sure that he treated everyone equally, and using his strength to be extraordinarily protective of his children, and ultimately his grandchildren as well. Now, as many of you know, at a certain moment in Frank's life, he started to shift. And he moved from being a CPA to engaging with a PhD in family therapy. And as Brad shared, he started asking a lot about feelings, which was a departure from his previous experience. Dina shared that she felt like she was married twice to the same person. Totally different Frank. Now, this shift is when he started to internalize the idea of being the reed, the flexible, compassionate, bending toward each person individually and uniquely Frank. He used this flexibility to embrace equality amongst his children, not distinguishing between genders. And he used this flexibility to open his heart to new additions to his family, to spouses and partners of his children, sweetly supporting them in his own way, maybe even hugging them, and of course, being supportive of his grandchildren, using silly rhymes or terrible cookies, or reminding each of you that you are his favorite granddaughter or favorite first grandson of his second daughter. And even though, as you mentioned, he wasn't quite yet flexible enough to be effusive with emotional words, he filled his office with your pictures. And you knew that those pictures were his I love you. So some of what we see in Frank's life is not just the juxtaposition of the cedar and the reed, the strength and the flexibility, but also how they were constantly intertwined. Consciously or subconsciously, as a child of the Depression era, Frank's strength and steadiness so clearly grew out of a childhood that was overly flexible, inconsistent, full of changing financial circumstances and moving from place to place. When the bending in his life was overwhelming, the appeal of the cedar took hold. And as Frank came to the end of his life, and his health and his memory began to decline, his softness deepened. The gentleness of the reed came through, and he finally found the abundance of love that his soul had been yearning for, an awakening of how to bend toward others. And in this moment, even as the Frank that most of us knew receded, I think there was a subconscious awareness that you, all of you, his family, that surrounded him and supported him, you had become his cedars. You had become his strength. You were his strength and steadiness in his final years. He saw you grown and growing. in some cases, very tall. But you were like cedars all around him. And even when there was fear and anxiety, he knew that it was safe and okay to express that to you because you were the strength that could hold it and help him. So I say to you, his family, which you probably already know, but as you move through these next days, these weeks, these months, and ultimately these years, be like Frank. Be the cedar and the reed. Be strong for each other when each of you need it. Strong and resolute and focused on justice for the world, for we surely need it. And be flexible and pliable and sensitive like the reed. Soft for one another, different and unique in your relationships to each other, attuned to the wind of the world so that you can bend and survive. For this is Frank's legacy, the cedar and the reed, the strength and the softness. And so, in honor of this profound man, at once so great and so dear, to share with you a poem by the poet Maya Angelou. And she writes, "When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die and our reality bound to them takes leave of us. Our souls dependent upon their nurture now shrink, wizened. Our minds formed and informed by their radiance fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration, our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed. He existed. We can be and be better, for he existed. Zichrono livracha. We honor Frank's memory. May his life and legacy forever be a blessing. And together we say, Amen.
It is with those truly beautiful words that we know that we have done something that was really hard. Telling the story of the life of a person we love and have lost is hard. And what a gift to each of us to be filled with those words and that legacy that we can take with us from this place. And so it is with those words in our heart that I ask you to please rise for our memorial prayer.
El Malei Rachamim Shochei Amsei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina. Im kedoshim udarim, kezohar harakia mazhirim. Et nishmat, et nishmat, Ephraim henachamu minna, shehalach le'olamo. Barachamim, yostireu beseter kenafa, le'olamim. Beitzror, beitzror, hachayim et nishmato. Adonai, unachalato. Ve'anuach beshalom al mishkavo. Ve'nomar Amen.
God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one, Frank Schneider, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold him close to you forever, thus so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen.
Amen. In just a moment, we are going to move from our service here to the cemetery. Before we do that, the family would like me to let you know that they will be sitting Shiva, gathering together at the following days and times here in Denver. Today, Friday, from 4 to 6 p.m. Tomorrow, Saturday, from 2 to 5 p.m., there will be casual visitation. Saturday evening, Shiva is 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. with a minyan at 7 p.m. led by Rabbi Hyatt. Sunday, Shiva 2 to 5 p.m., and then again 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. with a minyan at 7, which will be led by me. All of that will be at Charles and Kim's home at 120 South Grape Street, very close to where we are right now. Shiva will then continue on Monday in Chicago as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will have interment at Emmanuel Cemetery. We do not have an escorted procession today, so as soon as we escort the casket and the family to their cars, if we can ask you if you'd like to join us to start making your way to your cars very quickly. Please don't delay with the conversation in the foyer. You're welcome to follow the hearse and the family car. If you do, I must remind you, since we're not in procession, you have to obey all traffic laws. And one last request is if you see the family out and about in the foyer using the restroom, please allow them to do what they need to do so they can get to the car, so they can get to the cemetery quickly. At this time, I'll invite the pallbearers forward, ask everyone to remain in your places until we escort the casket out.